There's something quietly revealing about a person who keeps opening old messages alone at night. They scroll up slowly, almost carefully, like they are searching for something they already lost. It looks harmless from the outside, but inside, something deeper is quietly happening to them. Psychology suggests this small habit is rarely about the message itself and almost never random. It is about a feeling they are trying to hold, recreate, or finally make sense of internally. By the end of this, you will understand the hidden pattern behind this very human, very subtle behavior. You will see why the mind keeps returning to old words long after the conversation has ended. And you will likely recognize a piece of yourself, or someone close, hiding inside this quiet ritual. Most people who reread old messages are not stuck in the past the way others assume. They are trying to understand a version of themselves that existed during that exact conversation. Every message holds a snapshot of who they were, what they hoped, and what they secretly feared. So when they reopen it, they are not just reading words, they are revisiting an emotional self. This is why one short message can suddenly feel heavier than an entire long, ordinary day. Psychologists call this emotional anchoring, where memory ties a feeling to a small, specific digital trace. The message becomes a doorway, and behind that doorway lives a moment they never fully processed. Sometimes that moment was love, sometimes it was hope, and sometimes it was quiet, unspoken disappointment. The mind keeps circling back because something inside that exchange was never truly understood or closed. You see, unfinished emotions do not disappear. They wait patiently for any chance to be revisited. A single old text can reopen a feeling the person thought they had already moved past completely. That is why rereading messages feels strangely intimate, almost like talking to a former version of yourself. There is also a deep connection between rereading messages and the search for emotional validation inside. When someone feels invisible during the day, old messages can quietly remind them they once mattered deeply. A simple, "I miss you" from months ago can temporarily soothe the nervous system craving reassurance. It is not weakness, it is the mind trying to regulate itself using familiar emotional evidence. The brain treats kind words from the past as proof that connection, warmth, and closeness were real. In moments of loneliness, that proof becomes more comforting than any new conversation could possibly feel. This is why people often reread messages late at night when their defenses are at their lowest. The quiet hours strip away distraction, and suddenly the heart wants something familiar, soft, and emotionally safe. Old messages feel safer than new conversations because the outcome is already known and cannot hurt them. There is no risk of rejection, misreading, or silence, only words that already happened, frozen in time. For an anxious mind, that predictability feels like a small, controlled island in an unpredictable emotional ocean. But there is something deeper hiding underneath this habit, something most people never admit even to themselves. Rereading old messages is often a quiet attempt to rewrite the meaning of what actually happened. The mind searches for missed signals, hidden warmth, or subtle proof that the connection meant something real. Sometimes it searches for the opposite, evidence that the other person was wrong, cold, or clearly unfair. Either way, the goal is the same, to finally settle a story the heart never closed properly. Psychology calls this cognitive reappraisal, reshaping a memory by reinterpreting its details from a calmer distance. It can be healing when used wisely, but it can also trap a person in endless emotional loops. Because every reread is a fresh interpretation, the meaning of the message keeps shifting with their mood. On a hopeful day, the message feels warm, and on a tired day, it suddenly feels distant. The words never changed, but the reader did, and that is the strange power of memory. This is why people sometimes feel addicted to rereading, even when it clearly hurts them afterward. The nervous system gets a small spike of emotional intensity, almost like reopening a familiar bittersweet wound. That intensity feels like aliveness, especially for someone who has been emotionally numb for a long time. So the habit is not really about the other person, it is about feeling something real again. And here's the part most people miss, the part that quietly reveals something deeper about them. People who reread messages are usually highly self-aware, deeply reflective, and emotionally more sensitive than average. They do not move on quickly because they actually feel things in layers, slowly and very deeply. This is not a flaw, it is a sign of an emotionally rich inner world many people lack. With that same depth can become a trap when there is no safe place to release the feelings. So the messages become the container, the witness, and the secret diary of an unspoken inner life. You are not strange for doing this, and you are not stuck for feeling things this strongly. You are simply someone whose heart finishes processing things long after the conversation has officially ended. That awareness is not weakness, it is the beginning of real emotional maturity, even if it hurts sometimes. There is also a subtle identity layer hidden underneath this behavior that almost nobody talks about openly. When someone rereads old messages, they are quietly asking, was I really seen back then, truly? They are checking if the version of themselves in that conversation was loved, respected, or genuinely understood. If the answer feels uncertain, the mind keeps returning, hoping to finally find a clearer emotional verdict. This is why a single ambiguous message can be reread dozens of times without ever feeling resolved. The brain is not searching for new information, it is searching for emotional certainty that never arrived. And here is a sharp truth worth sitting with for a moment before we move forward together. It is not the message they cannot let go of. It is the meaning they assign to it. The words are just symbols, but the meaning underneath them is tied to self-worth, hope, and identity. That is why letting go feels impossible, because letting go feels like losing a piece of themselves. But you do not have to lose yourself to release a conversation that already finished long ago. You can keep the lesson, keep the memory, and still gently close the emotional door behind it. Here's a small but powerful shift that can change how you relate to old messages forever. The next time you feel pulled to reread something, pause and ask what feeling you are seeking. Are you searching for comfort, proof, closure, validation, or simply company in a quiet, lonely moment? Naming the feeling reduces its grip because the mind no longer has to act it out blindly. Often, just recognizing the real need is enough to soften the urge to scroll back through history. You begin to see the habit as information, not failure, and that changes everything about your awareness. Another quiet truth is that rereading often happens when present life feels emotionally flat or uncertain. The past feels vivid because it carries strong emotion, while the present can feel dull and unclear. So the mind reaches backward for color, intensity, and meaning it cannot yet find in the present. This is not your fault, but it is a signal worth listening to with honesty and care. It usually means a part of you is hungry for connection, expression, or emotional aliveness right now. When you start feeding that hunger in the present, the pull toward old messages naturally begins fading. You will not have to force yourself to stop. The habit will simply lose its emotional usefulness. That is how real change works, not through pressure, but through giving yourself something better to feel. There is also something quietly powerful about choosing not to reopen a message you almost opened. In that small moment, you are telling your nervous system that you can survive without the familiar ache. You are showing yourself that your worth is not stored inside someone else's old words anymore. That single choice, repeated quietly over time, slowly rewires how you relate to memory and connection. You stop searching the past for proof because you start building proof inside your present life. And eventually those old messages become exactly what they always were, simply words from a previous chapter. They lose their grip, not because you forced anything, but because you finally outgrew their emotional weight. So if you keep rereading old messages, understand that it does not mean something is wrong with you. It means something inside you is still speaking, still feeling, and still asking to be heard properly. Listen to that part with patience, not judgment, because it has been carrying more than you realize. You are not weak for remembering, you are not broken for caring, and you are not behind anyone. You are simply a person with depth, and depth always takes longer to settle than the surface. Give that depth time, give it kindness, and give it room to breed without constant emotional revisiting. The messages will still exist, but they will stop pulling you backward when your present feels enough. That is the quiet freedom waiting on the other side of this very human, very common habit. If this spoke to something you have felt but never said, you are clearly not alone here. Stay with us for more honest looks at the subtle patterns shaping how you think, feel, and connect.